Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you a simply unbelievable story. Let's learn about the near-death experience of Cassius Lockridge, a man who died for 20 minutes and came back with a shocking revelation. During his journey into the afterlife, he met Jesus, but what he told him goes against everything religions teach. What Cassius saw on the other side completely changed his view of life and spirituality, and it could change yours too. So before we start, leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this impactful and transformative story. My name is Cassius Lockridge. I have 41 years, and until recently, my life was exactly what I expected it to be. Predictable, safe, on track. I was born and raised in Seattle and Washington, where I worked for more than 15 years as a supervisor in the juvenile probation department. My routine was methodical, disciplined, and my beliefs were solid, shaped by the religious traditions I inherited from my family. I went to church every Sunday. I prayed before meals. I tried to live a good life. I've never been the type to engage in philosophical or existential questions. I believed in God because I was told he existed, and that was enough for me, or at least it was enough until the day I died. The truth is, I never thought much about death, not in the profound way that some people do. For me, it was just an inevitable end, followed by what the scriptures describe: judgment, heaven, or hell. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened to me on May 14th, 2006. You took that day. My heart stopped beating for almost 20 minutes, and in those 20 minutes, I saw something that completely changed my perception of reality. I saw beyond the light. I remember the exact moment my life changed. An intense pain ripped through my left side, a pang so sharp that my legs felt weak. Sweat ran down my forehead. Eleanor, my wife, ran to me, holding me by the shoulders. Cassius? What it was. I tried to respond, but my mouth was dry. The pain increased. I fell to my knees on the kitchen floor, panting. The world around me seemed to grow distant, as if someone were turning a volume knob and turning down the sound of reality. "Call an ambulance," I managed to mutter. Eleanor picked up the phone with shaking hands. I could hear the tone of her voice, but the words sounded distant, as if I were underwater. In some corner of my mind, a voice whispered something I didn't want to believe. "You won't come back." The last thing I saw before passing out was Eleanor's look of despair, and the kitchen ceiling light getting darker and darker. The sound of the ambulance siren seemed to mix with my heartbeat, which sounded like a drum resonating inside my skull. I was conscious, but the pain burned like hot coals in my abdomen. Every bump on the stretcher was a reminder of how fragile my body was. "Hang in there, Mr. Lockridge," one of the paramedics said, his voice thick with urgency. "We're almost there." Eleanor held my hand so tightly that I felt the sting of her fingers squeezing mine. Her eyes were wide, wet, and she tried to maintain her composure, but the fear was there, visible like a specter. "I'm here, Cassius. You'll be fine." I wanted to respond, but I couldn't anymore. My mouth was dry, my chest tight. I felt the world spinning around me, as if I were trapped in an invisible whirlwind. The paramedics kept shouting medical information that didn't make sense to me. Dropping blood pressure, irregular pulse. "We need to run." The ambulance doors opened amid a storm of voices, lights, and rush. I was rushed into the hospital, where a team was already waiting for me. I felt the metallic coldness of the exam table, the blinding lights from the ceiling. A watchful-eyed doctor hovered over me, adjusting an oxygen mask over my face. "Mr. Lockridge, we managed to stabilize you, but you need immediate surgery. Do you understand?" I shook my head lightly. Fear finally hit hard inside me. Eleanor's eyes found me at the last second. They carried a silent dread, as if she knew something was about to happen. I never believed in omens, but at that moment I knew for sure that something was deeply wrong. Anesthesia was injected. My body felt heavy. My vision became blurred. The world around me began to disappear, and the last thing I saw was Eleanor being taken away by the medical team. The last thing I heard before everything went dark was a doctor saying, "Starting the countdown. It will go out in 3, 2, and then nothing. An absolute silence. An infinite void. And then something much, much bigger than I could ever imagine began. In the next instant, I felt something strange. I was conscious, but I was no longer inside my body. He floated above the operating table, observing the scene below with impossible clarity. I saw everything, heard everything, but I no longer felt anything. No pain, no pressure, no worries, just an indescribable lightness. Below me, my own body lay limp on the operating table. My skin was pale. My lips were starting to turn blue. I saw the doctors moving in a hurry, faces tense, sweat dripping down Dr. Alan Whitmore's forehead as he tried to revive my stopped heart. "Come on, Lockridge, don't give up on me now," he shouted, preparing the defibrillator. I heard the screeching sound of the equipment charging and then the electric shock running through my inert chest. My body shook, but there was no response. No pulse. Trying again, another shock. Nothing. It was a scene that should have been terrifying, but I felt a strange peace. There was no despair, no panic, just a deep certainty that everything was happening exactly as it should. Then I saw Eleanor. She was on the other side of the wall, but I could see her clearly, as if there were no physical barriers between us. She held the ring in her trembling fingers, whispering a muffled prayer, her face covered in tears. "Please, God, don't take him away." The pain in her voice should have broken my heart, but in that moment, I wanted to tell her that I was fine, that I was there. Then something changed. I felt a force pulling me up, slow but inexorable, like an invisible tide pulling me away from that place. The operating room began to recede below me, as if I were rising through an invisible current. I passed through the ceiling without resistance, as if the matter no longer meant anything to me. The light around me became more intense. The hospital, Seattle, Earth, everything started to drift apart. And then, I saw it. The light. She wasn't just a glow in the distance. It was alive. He was conscious. It was a calling I couldn't ignore. In the next instant, I was pulled into her, and everything changed. The instant I was pulled into the light, everything around me disappeared. There was no longer a hospital, doctors, or even the sensation of a physical body. It was as if I had passed through an invisible veil into a new plane of existence. The light wasn't just bright, she was alive. She enveloped me completely, not like a source of heat, but like a conscious presence. I felt welcomed in a way that no words could describe. It was as if all the pain, fear, and worry I had carried my entire life dissolved the moment I walked in there. Suddenly, I noticed something curious. I'm a worm. It was not an ordinary sound, like the ones we hear on Earth. It was something much deeper, a resonance, a cosmic harmony, as if the entire universe were singing in unison. Each particle of this light seemed to vibrate at a different frequency, composing an indescribable melody. I felt small in the face of the vastness around me, but at the same time I knew I was part of it all. It was then that I realized that I wasn't alone. Shapes began to emerge in the light, subtle outlines of beings that seemed made of the same glowing energy that enveloped me. They didn't have defined faces, but I could feel their essence. They were family. Cassius, your home. The words were not spoken, but they echoed within me, as if my own soul was translating the meaning of that presence. I didn't know who they were, but at the same time I knew them. It was like meeting friends who had always been with me, but who I had forgotten during my life on Earth. I was overcome by a love so pure, so absolute, that my eyes filled with tears. If I still had eyes in that state, is this heaven? My question was not asked with words, but with a thought. There was a pause, as if the presences were smiling. This is just the beginning. Before I could fully understand what this meant, I felt a change in the light. Something bigger was approaching. The light around me began to pulse with a different intensity, and I knew instinctively that I was about to meet someone who would change everything. I was about to see Jesus. The light around me pulsed, vibrated as if it were alive. A presence approached. I didn't see a body. I didn't see a clearly defined silhouette, but felt. It was an overwhelming energy, a force so immense that for a moment I thought I would be crushed by its grandeur. But then I realized it was exactly the opposite. The presence was pure love. It was as if every cell of my existence was enveloped by an invisible embrace, a tenderness so absolute that my internal barriers dissolved. Then, the light took shape before me. He was not like the paintings in churches, nor like the statues I had seen since I was a child. Jesus was not a man of flesh and blood. He was living light, pure consciousness, absolute love materialized. I didn't hear your voice with my ears, but I felt every word inside me. as if they were woven into the essence of my being. Cassius, you were always with me. My legs gave way. If I still had a physical body, I would have fallen to my knees right there. But there was no fear, just a deep sense of belonging. Is this heaven? I asked. Or maybe I just thought. Jesus did not respond immediately. He showed me. Suddenly, my consciousness expanded. You an interconnection of all souls like golden threads that stretched across the universe, uniting every living being into a single luminous fabric. I saw children being born, old people leaving, mothers holding their children for the first time, people crying in despair. I saw murderers and saints, rich and poor, all linked by the same invisible energy. Everything is connected, Cassius. Always has been. My mind tried to process it. Then he continued, human religions have tried to translate this truth, but many have been lost. They created fear where there was love. They created punishment where there was learning. They created separation where there is only unity. I felt my heart squeeze. What he said was so different from anything I had learned on earth. So, there is no heaven and hell? Is there no trial? Jesus looked at me, or rather, his light expanded into compassion. Hell is not an eternal punishment. It is created within those who reject love. Heaven is not a place, Cassius. It is a state of being. It was like a blow. Everything I thought I knew. Was it wrong? But what about the scriptures and the churches? They tried to convey the truth, but the human mind distorts what it cannot understand. Fear has become a tool of control. But love, he paused. Love has always been the only truth. I was shaking. If there was a heart at that moment, it would be beating out of rhythm. And then, Jesus did something unexpected. He showed me my own life. Every choice, every mistake, every tough moment, and the most shocking, every time I chose love. And for the first time I saw that I've never been alone. Every difficult moment, every painful decision, he was there, always. I felt tears burning inside me. Why didn't I ever know about this? Why doesn't anyone teach us this? The answer came with immense smoothness. Because you needed to learn it yourself, and now you have a choice. My body, or what was left of it there, shuddered. What choice? Jesus approached, his light enveloping every part of me. Do you want to continue or go back? My heart stopped. To go back? I didn't want to go back. Not now. Not after knowing the truth. Jesus' invitation echoed within me. Go back or continue? My instinct screamed an immediate response. I wanted to stay. There. Everything made sense. There was no pain. There was no fear. There was no uncertainty. I was enveloped by a love that transcended any human emotion. The very light that surrounded me was alive, vibrant, pulsating. But before I could respond, Jesus showed me something that would completely transform my view of what heaven meant. My consciousness expanded again. The space around me changed. The light gave way to a huge field, where the sky seemed like a blanket of gold, and every leaf on every tree shone as if it were made of liquid light. The air had a heavenly fragrance, something between jasmine and the fresh scent after rain. I breathed and felt peace penetrating my essence. The ground felt alive, pulsing beneath my feet. Paradise itself was a conscious entity. So, I saw people, but it wasn't just people. They were souls, radiant, vibrant, filled with a joy that I had never seen on earth. Some looked young, others older, but they were all in their best shape, without pain, without sadness. And then, a lump formed in my throat. There, walking towards me, was a man I hadn't seen in 30 years. Good? He smiled, and it was himself, but different, younger, stronger, brighter. Cassius. Son. I ran to him, or at least I thought I ran, because the next moment we were hugging each other, but it wasn't a normal hug. I could feel his soul connecting with mine, as if all the love he had ever had for me was flowing directly into me. But how? How are you here? He laughed. A full, serene laugh. I always have been. You just didn't remember. Other figures began to appear around. My grandmother, who died when I was a child. My best childhood friend, Giron, who lost his life in an accident. Even a teacher who marked my youth. Everyone looked at me with love. No judgment, no charges, just welcoming. Is this heaven? I asked again. Jesus, who was there, observing everything, smiled. That's a part of it. But there is more. And then he showed me. My vision expanded even further. Suddenly I saw galaxies spinning in spirals of light. I saw planets teeming with life that had never been mentioned in any sacred book. Saw beings that were not human, but radiated the same love that I felt there. All creation is connected, Cassius. Heaven is not a fixed place. It is vast, infinite, greater than any religion has ever been able to comprehend. I felt my soul shake. It was a lot of information. I could feel I was on the edge of something much bigger than my human mind could process. So I turned to Jesus. I want to stay. He smiled tenderly. I know. But then, the glow around him changed. It became more serious, more intense. But your mission is not over yet. I shuddered. Those words were a blow. Mission? What mission? His deep eyes pierced through me. You need to go back. I took a step back. No, I can't go back. How could I leave that? Paradise, my father. That infinite peace. Absolute love. Cassius. His voice was calm, but firm. You didn't come here to stay. You came to remember. My heart, or whatever my center was there, twisted. Remember what? Remember the truth, and take her back. I didn't want to. But then, I saw something. I saw my wife. Eleanor was in the hospital, holding my hand, tears streaming down her face. Is he gone? She asked, almost whispering. The sight was a punch in the chest. I saw Iris Montgomery, the young woman who was under my supervision. I saw her life. I saw how much she needed guidance that no one gave her. And then, I saw something that paralyzed me. I saw a future where I never returned. I saw the consequences of that. Eleanor never recovered. Iris ended up on a dark path. I saw so many lives that would be affected by my absence. The weight of reality hit me. I still had something to do. I closed my eyes. I understand. Jesus approached once again. Your light enveloped me. So, it's time to go back. I felt a force pulling me. Paradise began to recede into the distance. The love, the light, everything seemed to dissolve around me. And then, I fell. I fell straight into reality, and the pain came back like an avalanche. The return was not smooth. It was a brutal shock. The sensation was like being forcibly ripped from a perfect dream and thrown back into a fragile, broken body. Pain exploded in every nerve in my being. It was as if I was being compressed into a space too small to contain my consciousness. I tried to fight it. I didn't want to go back. I felt myself falling into a vortex, being sucked into a force that was pulling me faster and faster. The light of paradise began to dissolve around me, turning into shadows and darkness. The love that surrounded me began to disappear, giving way to the cold of the physical world. No, my mind screamed. I didn't want to lose that, but there was no choice. I was being pulled back. Then, one last message from Jesus resonated within me. Trust, you are not alone. And then, the impact came. The shock of electricity piercing my chest made my consciousness explode into 1,000 fragments. It was like being struck by lightning. My body heaved. My mouth opened in a silent scream. Again, I heard a voice shout. Another shock. My heart, previously immobile, was flushed. This time something happened. I felt a force pulling me back into my body as if an anchor was being dropped to the bottom of the ocean. My eyes shot open, and the world invaded my mind. Blinding lights, shrill sounds, voices screaming. He's back. We have a pulse. Air rushed violently into my lungs and I coughed, choking. The pain was unbearable. Every fiber of my body felt burned, as if I had been plucked out of nowhere and thrown onto the concrete. My chest rose and fell in despair. My hands were shaking. I was alive, but something inside me had changed. My mind was still between worlds. I could still feel paradise. I could feel the presence of Jesus, even if faintly, like a distant echo. But I also felt something else. The pain of reality. Eleanor ran into the emergency room. His face was soaked with tears. His breathing was ragged. When he saw my eyes open, he stopped, put his hands over his mouth and let out a sob. Cassius. My voice was weak, a barely audible whisper. I am here. She fell beside me, holding my hand as if she were afraid I would disappear again. My God, I thought I lost you. You were dead. I blinked slowly, trying to take it all in. And how could I explain to her what happened? The answer came immediately. I could not. Not yet. The doctors were still in a frenzy around me. Dr. Whitmore was checking the monitors, with the expression of someone who I had just witnessed an inexplicable miracle. "This is impossible," he murmured, looking at the cardiac charts. I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. It was impossible for them, but for me, it was just the beginning. Even so, a strange feeling came over me. A weight, an overwhelming responsibility. I wanted to stay in paradise, but now, I had to fulfill a mission. The question was the hospital seemed at the same time familiar and strange. The white walls, the smell of antiseptic, the monitors beeping around me. It was all supposed to reassure me, supposed to remind me that I was back in the world of the living. But something was different. It was like I was still between worlds. My body was here, but my soul still felt the echo of paradise. Eleanor was still holding my hand as if she were afraid I would disappear again. His eyes were filled with tears, but also with shock. "My God, Cassius, you were dead." The doctor said they had already given up. My throat was dry, my voice a wisp of sound. "I know." She blinked, confused. "What?" Before I could respond, Dr. Whitmore entered the room. He still wore his surgical gloves, but his expression was not that of a doctor who had just saved a patient. It was that of a man trying to understand the impossible. He examined the monitors, adjusted the cables attached to my chest, and looked directly at me. "Lockridge, can you hear me?" I nodded slowly. My body was still exhausted, but I was more aware than ever. He hesitated, crossing his arms, as if trying to find the right words. "I'll be very direct. You technically died for almost 20 minutes. Silence. No one in the room was breathing. We tried everything. Adrenaline, cardiac massage, electric shocks. His heart didn't respond. By now, you should have severe brain damage, if you were alive. But you are here. No sequelae. No explanation." He scratched his head, irritated at his own inability to understand. "I'm not a religious man, Lockridge, but..." He looked directly at me. This was a miracle. The word hung in the air. Miracle. That's what they were seeing. But I knew it was more than that. It was then that I realized something strange. I looked at Whitmore and Eleanor, and saw something that shouldn't be there. Lights. Translucent halos hovering around them. Eleanor had a golden hue around her, pulsing like a serene flame. Whitmore, in contrast, had a faint, unstable blue glow, wavering like a sail fighting the wind. My breath caught in my throat. I was seeing their energies. I closed my eyes. I opened it again. The lights were still there. "Cassius?" Eleanor called, worried. I shook my head, trying to clear my mind. My experience on the other side had left a mark. Not only had I come back, I had come back different. Whitmore continued to watch me, his skepticism now mixed with something close to admiration. "Do you remember anything?" My mouth opened to respond, but the words stuck. How could I explain that I had found Jesus? That heaven was real, but not as we imagined? That I'd been sent back with a mission I didn't even fully understand yet? I took a deep breath. It wasn't the time. I remember a few things. Flashes. Saves. Whitmore nodded, as if he was relieved that I wasn't saying anything crazy. "It's normal. Some people report strange experiences after cardiac arrest." He made a note in the medical record. "We'll monitor it for a few more days, but honestly, I've never seen anything like this before. You were very lucky. If only he knew." Eleanor squeezed my hand tightly, bringing me back to reality. "The important thing is that you're back." I stared at her. She didn't know. None of them knew, but I knew. And the question that was going through my mind was, what would I do with this truth now? The following days were a blur of tests, doctor visits, and suspicious looks. Doctors examined me as if I were an inexplicable phenomenon, an enigma that science could not solve. But the real mystery wasn't in my body. It was inside me. Something had changed. Eleanor realized this before I even spoke. You're not the same, Cassius." We were alone in the hospital room. She held my hand, but her gaze was filled with uncertainty. "Since you woke up, it feels like you're here, but at the same time you're not." I looked away from the window, watching the light rain falling over Seattle. How could I explain something that I myself barely understood? I saw things. I felt things. That morning, a nurse came into the room and, before she even opened her mouth, I knew she was going through a divorce. I felt her pain as if it were mine. When Whitmore returned to examine me, I realized he carried a weight on his chest, a silent fear that he hid from everyone. And it wasn't just that. I still saw those lights. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real. When Eleanor shook my hand just now, I saw a golden trail leaving his fingers flowing towards me. It was pure, visible love. I blinked quickly, trying to shake it off, but didn't disappear. Cassius? His voice sounded worried. I took a deep breath. It was time to tell. I saw Jesus. Her eyes widened. What? I swallowed hard. When I died, I didn't disappear. I left my body. I saw everything. I saw the doctors trying to revive me. I saw you praying. And then, I went into the light. The silence in the room was absolute. Eleanor stared at me, as if waiting for me to say I was joking. But I wasn't. I've been there, Eleanor. On the other side. She removed her hand slowly, as if she were afraid of hurting me. Cassius, you almost died. Your brain has been without oxygen for a long time. Maybe these memories are just hallucinations? I completed it for her. She hesitated. I didn't want to hurt myself, but I was trying to find a logical explanation for something I couldn't understand. I know what I saw. My voice was firmer than I expected, and it wasn't a delusion. I saw the sky, but it wasn't how we were taught. Eleanor frowned. What do you mean? I thought about how to explain. How can you put something so immense into words? Jesus showed me that human religions have distorted the truth. Hell is not eternal punishment, and heaven is not a place made of golden streets and pearly gates. It is a state of consciousness, a state of pure love. She took a deep breath, crossing her arms. Cassius, you have always been a Christian. This is not what we learn in church. Exactly. My voice rose. That's why all this scares me. The truth is much bigger than we imagine, and I don't know what to do with it. I stared at her, searching for some sign of understanding, but all I saw was uncertainty. She forced a smile, the kind of smile you give to someone who has just said something that doesn't make sense. You just came back from the dead, Cassius. Maybe you're still trying to process all of this. My shoulders slumped. She didn't believe it. That's it, my own wife didn't believe. How would anyone else believe? Suddenly, a thought hit me like a punch. What if I'm alone in this? My breathing became shallow. The hospital, the world, reality itself seemed distant. In paradise, I was surrounded by love and understanding. Here, I was just a man who came back from the dead with a story no one wanted to hear. And then, I noticed something even more disturbing. If I had come back, it was because I still had a mission. But how could I accomplish this mission if no one believed in me? In the days following my release from the hospital, I began to realize the weight of the mission given to me. With every person I saw, every face I passed on the street, felt something different. I could see the pain they carried, the invisible burdens that no one noticed. And more than that, I felt how real the connection between all of us was. But there was a problem. Nobody believed me. Eleanor tried to be patient, but I could see in her eyes that she thought I was delusional. My co-workers avoided bringing it up. Dr. Whitmore even suggested that I see a therapist who specializes in patients who have experienced near-death trauma. Even my pastor, someone I deeply respected, listened to me in silence and then replied coldly, Cassius, what you experienced was unusual to say the least. But if what you saw contradicts the scriptures, perhaps it wasn't really God who showed you this. That was a blow. Are you saying I was tricked? That Jesus himself deceived me? The pastor sighed. Cassius, the enemy is cunning. He can pass himself off as an angel of light. I shook my head, frustrated. This wasn't a trap, Pastor. I felt Jesus. He wasn't playing tricks on me. He showed me that love is the only truth. There is no eternal damnation. There is no divine punishment. Just growth, learning. The pastor looked at me with regret. This is not what the Bible teaches. I was silent for a moment. Or maybe, it's not what the human interpretation of the Bible teaches. The conversation ended there. He didn't want to hear anything else. And at that moment, I realized something painful. I was alone. If I were to fulfill my mission, it could not depend on churches, doctrines, or religions. I would have to do this otherwise. It was the following week, when I returned to work, that something unexpected happened. Iris Montgomery, a teenager under my probation supervision, entered my office with the same look as always: revolt, disinterest, contempt for the world. Before, I saw her as another record in my system, another lost cause. But now, I saw something different. The same golden light I had seen in the hospital flickered around her, weak, unstable, but there. And for the first time, in all the months of supervising his parole, I asked him something I had never asked him before. "Iris, are you okay?" She frowned. "What kind of question is this?" "Sincere. Pause. I know you've been through a lot. I just want to know if you're okay." She looked at me suspiciously, and then let out a short, bitter laugh. For the first time, someone has asked this and seems to genuinely want to hear the answer. Something inside me tightened. "And I want to." Iris took a deep breath, hesitated, and then, for the first time, he vented. He spoke of his difficult childhood, of abandonment, of nights sleeping on the street, of the hatred he felt for everything and everyone. And I listened, in truth, because now I knew that my mission was not to convert anyone. It was loving. It was about being present. It was listening. Show heaven through my actions, not through empty words. The experience with Iris was a milestone, the first of many. I started to realize that didn't need a pulpit to spread the truth. Heaven did not need to be preached. It needed to be lived. And then I understood. Jesus didn't send me back to talk about doctrines. He sent me back to be a reflection of the love I had felt there. I didn't have all the answers. But now, it had a purpose. What if I could show just one person, just one soul, that love was real, that the connection between us was true? Then my mission would be accomplished. Why heaven is not a distant place. It starts within us. Conclusion. My near-death experience changed everything. My faith, my view of the world, my mission, and I know many won't believe it. But if you're reading this now, maybe this message is for you. Perhaps you need to hear, you were never alone. You were never convicted. You have never been rejected. Why love is the only truth, and heaven is already here. You just need to remember. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.